That's number one. For each family, you can start with that, and it tells you things that you can put down, their birth and their christening and the marriage, but also put down next to it where you found this material. If you need to refer to it again, you're going to know, well, I've already looked there, and that's where I found it. And then down at the bottom, you can put their children's names. Well, this is good material to get you started and something you can refer back to when you are finally starting to put your tree together. You can check out your local library to see if they have any Ancestry.com. I know Lewiston does. I don't know about Auburn or other libraries. But they have a library edition where you can go and find census. You can find, as I mentioned, Social Security information that's on there. You can find draft registrations, border crossings. Russ had an uncle who was a jockey, and he went back and forth to Canada to the States many times a year, and they're all recorded there. It's very interesting to see who he gave as the person he was going to see on the other side. Quite often it was somebody different, but it was for his work. But you had to have a person to sponsor you if you were going to go over there to work. Ancestry also has some street directories, which I found very interesting. Like census is every 10 years. There's no record of the 1890 because the pages got burned. But sometimes, like in Fall River in the street directory, you can see where your family members were at these times in between times. You can see who they've lived with. Like in Fall River, Massachusetts, they're big tenements, like here, and there'd be maybe 4 family tenements. All of a sudden, everybody's under one address on the census, but you can see it'll list what floor they lived on and who the owner was or who rented. Let's see. When you're looking at Ancestry, if you get to the point where you start looking at other people's genealogical trees that they have put up, you have to be very careful with what they have there, because with my grandfather, Solomon, I have found him as Solomon in some people's trees, and they haven't bothered to look at any other census except for that one to find out that's not who he was. In another one, I found Salmon and Solomon as twin brothers because they found birth dates for the same birth date, so they must have been. And people will say, well, it's there. Well, you've got to have a little discernment when you're doing some of these things. You can start out by saying this is the fact, but then as you work around, you're going to find out, well, maybe this wasn't quite it, or I have some ancestors who, my grandfather's brother was Eugene Vivian Washburn. Okay, so I'm looking, and one year there's a child Vivian, and we can't find Eugene. We'll come to find out he was, some years they used middle names, and some years they used first names. So these are some of the things you have to sort of look out for when you're doing the research. But I have a second sheet that's called 4 Generations, and you decide who, whether it's you, your husband, or your father, or your mother is the first one. And this way you can write down people who they are, and then start filling in their birthplace, marriage place, death. And it gives you something that you can look at, take with you when you can't always take a computer. Quite often your computer programs, you can find something that looks like that, but it's good to have something that you can write on, because once you hit the wrong key in a computer, it'll disappear and you might not get it back. And sometimes, as I said, computers crash. I just got email today from my husband's third cousin in Alberta, Canada. And he has a website that has 50-some contributors. So this tree he's got goes everywhere. His apple crashed, and it took him a month with experts to be able to put in new things and get it all back. So it's good. Computers are wonderful, but so isn't the good old paper and pen or pencil. My husband thought that maybe if you would like a copy of what I've said, though it looks a little different on paper, he has one at the door when you leave. And I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I add something about computers while you're getting ready? Some of us have learned the hard way, haven't we? I'm now at a point where I've done so much that I back up my genealogy software every 2 weeks on early Sunday morning on, you know those little discs that you put in your camera? That's the one that I use that holds the most genealogy. And I don't just back it up once a year. I back it, and then I actually, sometimes if I'm feeling nervous, I back it up on my flash drive, so I've got backups of my backups, because I can't bear the thought of losing all that work for that many years. So I back up all the photographs that I scan, every document, because you are so right, a computer can crash or a program can crash. And then for backups, I have hard copies of paper of everything. And I think I must be paranoid.
No, the computers did not take away papers. They thought once computers came, books is over.
But I love working on the computer and doing it all that way, but I don't have everything entrusted to the computer. I just don't dare. Go ahead.
Where do you keep your backup? You know?
Oh, wouldn't you like to know?
I keep it in the
Someplace
Well, I'll tell you the truth.
different.
someplace different.
When I go on a trip, all of those things go in my washing machine. I feel it's the safest, most protected place because of the drum. I mean, years ago I used to take everything and put it out in the garage, and that's not any safer than in my house. So I feel, until I get a better system, that all those backups and everything goes in my washer.
But if you have a fire, so you have to find and you have a copy of it also.
Yes.
Or an alternative would be a safe deposit box.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my case, I'd be going to it every 2 weeks. So, anyway, that's a good question.
Maybe not every 2 weeks, but you could go every month or so.
So here she comes again.
Okay. All right. I started my genealogy back in the 70s, as indicated, where we weren't using computers, and much of what I did was the old-fashioned way. But really, you do need to deal with all of the resources that you can find, but be very cautious about the fact that people make mistakes in reporting, in taking down, in the publishing process, and so forth. So one of the ways you can get started is to go to various published genealogies. That corresponds to some extent to what you get online. But these are available. Some published genealogies are for a particular surname. So there's this kind of book for the Little family of Edward Little fame here in Lewiston, Auburn. And so there are all kinds of descendants from an original Little. That's one style. Another style is to have a genealogy where you start with a particular person and then work backwards. It's all the ancestors of so-and-so. And for that one you can look, I found that the Maine State Library catalog is very good at taking pieces of the book, shall we say, and indexing under a lot of family names, not just the one family name, the paternal line, but all of those that are significant in that book. Another kind of genealogical work is found in town histories, especially back the late 90s, early 1900s. Well, this one's 1937, so it isn't typical, but the history of Green. And in here, there's material on families of Green, Maine. And so it would primarily deal with the people who are in the town, but sometimes the author will go back because his informant provides that information beyond what's in the town records. But deal with all of these with caution, as we have emphasized. There are also the directories, the town directories, and here's, I just took off the shelf here at the Society. These kinds of books are found in the Auburn Public Library, Lewiston Public Library. We have many of them. The Maine State Library is particularly good. The Maine Historical Society. Just go around to find out what you can find. And now you can access the catalogs of these libraries around the state, so you can do your research and find, the Maine State Library has this one.
Can I say
Yes.
something? I have used the Maine Library. Now, my ancestors are Massachusetts people, but I would come on the way to my aunt's house and to the Maine State Library, because I found all kinds of Massachusetts stuff up there. And my great-grandmother listed by couples from her parents all the way back to the Mayflower. And I had that list. But it took Russ and I a year and a half, 2.5 years, of going to find these kinds of books in local libraries and the Maine State Library, where you could find the person's family that they married into. So it wasn't the direct line, you couldn't find your direct, but all of a sudden you've got a new line. So even if you're looking for people who aren't from Maine, that's a wonderful place to do your research.
Carol mentioned the directories. We have the Lewiston and Auburn directory. This too, we have a very good collection here. It might be the most complete collection in the Twin Cities. The Auburn Public Library and the Lewiston Public Library do have many of these. But as indicated, you could find out that so-and-so was a farmer who lived off the old Danville Road, RFD number 2, and so on, and locate people. And especially if it's located by streets. We have Montello Street in Lewiston, listed house by house, so you can find out who lived in that house. Roughly, depends upon the publication date and when they collected the material.
And those have become really helpful if you're trying to find out when a family member died and you don't know. And I've done that many times for other people, actually. They'll say, when they contact me and say, I think he died first and then she died around 1935. Well, if I go through all the 1930 city directories, I can find the year that she's missing, right, by process of elimination. These can become one of your best friends for a lot of reasons, and they'll tell you occupations that family members and cousins and distant people had that you had no idea that they had for occupations. Hopefully you're interested in what they did for a living and how many times they moved and why did they move so often, and these are just priceless that way.
I used to call them spying on my relatives, because